With this panel, what we are hoping to do is to take a step back and have a little bit more holistic view of data curation, looking at the other individual sessions, citations, tools, policies, training, and so on. How do you, as an institution who's starting or in the middle of developing data curation services, look at all of those or a subset of those and decide these are the ones we want to go forward with, or this is how we want to actually organize many of these issues in combination. And we had a few short examples of this in the first session, and in this session we're going to have a couple of more in-depth cases as to how curation services can be developed at particular institutions. And so we have 3 speakers. It's going to be 20-minute talks, and we're going to leave a lot of time for discussion at the end. The first speaker is David Miner, who's from the University of California, San Diego. So he's the director for research initiatives at the UC San Diego Libraries and also the San Diego Supercomputer Center. He's program manager for the Chronopolis Digital Preservation Network, as well as a co-lead for the UCSD Curation Program. David.
Thank you. And actually, a funny story I want to start with just real quickly. We talked about this at lunch, some friends and I. My name as listed in the attendee list is, my name is correct, but it also lists my contact information as was correct in 1995, including my home address. So this is me, and there is also was me, but anyway. So yeah, as Matt said, I wanted to talk a little bit about the curation program that we're spinning up right now at UC San Diego, especially how it's situated in a larger campus effort, which we've been working on for about 4 years now, which is, I'll back up a step, Research Cyber Infrastructure, which we call RCI, because nobody wants to spell cyber infrastructure. And wanted to talk a little bit about how we got there, why we got there, why we made some decisions, and then we'll talk a little bit about a curation program. Not necessarily about the guts of the curation enterprise itself, but why, again, we're making some of the decisions we're making. So just to give a history here, started in 2008 with a campus-wide survey, and the survey was important because it really laid the groundwork, not only for the work that we did, but the process, because the survey was actually put out as a joint effort by the libraries on campus, the Supercomputer Center, VC of Research, a couple of other research organizations on campus. And so it was very much a campus-wide effort to see what researchers needed. And that's been kind of the driving goal that we've had all along. And the needs assessment in and of itself wasn't magical or different or exciting in some ways. It was just basically what do campus users need, what did they not have, what were some of the driving decisions they saw going forward in the new kind of research environment. And just a quick synopsis, and there were a couple dozen questions, so I'm not going to go into all of them. And this is all available publicly online. I'm going to give a link to it in just a second. But just in terms of some of the things that we kind of care about here, not surprisingly, we had a large request for just basic storage. Many people want to put stuff away, whether it's grant-related, research-related, what have you. We also had 64% indicated a need for long-term, and this is their terms, long-term preservation of data sets. And this was actually pretty gratifying, especially for those of us who were kind of thinking about this at that time, because we didn't think anyone else knew about this. And this is pre-data, data sharing mandates for pre-data, all this kind of stuff that we are facing today. So this was coming out of the research community. They also indicated needing help for data management, metadata creation, sharing, all the kinds of things that people in this room we care about. So we took the results of that survey and produced a document with the fancy title of Blueprint for the Digital University. And this is a public document that's available online. And if you just do a web search for that, then you will find it. In preparation for this, I always you want to fact check as much as possible. I used to say if you do a Google search on this, you'll find it, which is still the case. If you do a Bing search for it, you get the Jay-Z album. But it's out there, and it actually has the survey results I just referred to. as well as the recommendations. And basically this document, it's about 115 pages, was the way that we laid out what does the campus need to be doing next year, well, it's 2009, yeah, 2010, 2015, and beyond. What direction should the campus be taking? And they're very specific recommendations, as in, we need a program that does data management, and it should be staffed by librarians in conjunction with researchers, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's pretty a guiding document. And it was handed off to campus president, who read through it and said, fine, I think we can make this happen. Can you put budget numbers behind this stuff? So this was about 2 years ago now. And so we actually had a committee called the CPOC Committee, which was a vehicle to actually try to create services on campus. And this is not a public document because it actually has, FTE numbers and budgets and salaries and all those kinds of things to actually get back to the campus to make this happen. And we sat on pins and needles with this because it was turned in, late spring of 2010, and we didn't hear anything for about 6 or 8 months. And but we finally did hear in January of 2011 that it was going to be funded, that we had a program that was going to be going forward. An oversight committee was created. And again, the oversight committee, the good thing here was for people all around campus, with prominent representation from the library, so we're very pleased with that, as well as the research units on campus. And they basically said, okay, we mostly funded the budget you've asked for, go and make it happen. And so we're entering kind of our second year. Well, the oversight committee was funded, we kind of got the check September, October of this year, so we're still kind of in our infancy here. So, just to talk a little bit about the specific elements. As I said, data curation is just one of about a half dozen things we have here, and I'm going to touch on these just very briefly. I'm happy to talk about them in depth at another time or sidebar or anything. But these were based on, again, the needs that campus said they wanted. High performance computing, we do have a supercomputer center on campus, so that was a good fit for us. But we were really pushed to make it available and usable to our local users. Most supercomputers are not available and usable by local users, almost by definition. And so we were tasked with spinning up new processes and new tools for this. Also to look at new ways to provide high performance computing, such as condo computing, kind of virtual machines, all those kinds of things that tend to happen. So we're looking hard at that. Data center co-location. And this is basically, I think as we all probably see on our campuses, people have data, servers in janitors' closets and under desks and disks on shelves and all this kind of stuff. And besides the fact that that's a really bad idea, it's also in the long run very expensive because you have people using up lots and lots of power in campus in inappropriate ways and inappropriate locations. And so this is a move that the campus is looking at to actually help fund movement of systems into 24/7, 365 real data centers, and how to make that happen, et cetera, et cetera. And then everything that kind of goes around that, basic services. The last one here is the most important one, a 10 gigabit network connection throughout campus to all the buildings. That's pretty much done at this point, and that's significant because without that, the whole notion of a data center co-location is not going to fly because you just can't move bits around. And I'm here to tell you in 2012, it's still always the network that kills me. Getting a little bit closer to curation here, storage. We actually redesigned our data center based on our user needs. I don't know how well you can see that. The top level is really kind of high performance computing storage. It's a lot of storage that like 12 people use just because that's what you do when using supercomputer. What we're calling project storage is basically kind of standard NSF, CIFS, melts, normal storage that we all have. And then we also have spun up a cloud storage instance. And basically this is a local cloud storage. Looks just like Amazon, Rackspace. It's actually based on the Rackspace technology, if you know what that is. And it's an easy, cheap way for primarily our users, but it's also open to anyone who wants to use it, to use that kind of storage. Very simple, get, put, view your directories and data, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of exciting. And then the last one, and certainly not the least one, and what I'm going to spend some time talking about here, is a campus-wide data curation program. And this program is co-managed. It's primarily led by the University Libraries, not surprisingly, but also takes into account the storage at the Supercomputer Center and the networking is provided by Central Campus, and also all the kind of liaison and metadata work that has already been grown over the decades on the campus. And two things I especially want to highlight about the process overall. We're definitely starting in a pilot phase here because this is a brand new service. And so we wanted to see how expensive it was, how well it worked, how much uptake we had, what the response was, et cetera, et cetera. And the second thing, and this is a driving part of the pilot phase, is using existing tools wherever possible. Because when we kind of step back and look, and this was an important design consideration, the individual pieces of the curation program we basically had in place, right? We had storage, we had metadata experts, we had all these kinds of things, but it's the unification and creating those into a program that's the new, different, kind of difficult part. And so that's a real driving consideration there. These are I have two web links here. It's easy if you just go to rci.ucsd.edu. You see kind of everything I'm talking about here. And then there's a link to the data curation and the pilots, which I'm going to talk about in just a second. Just to have the obligatory semi-technical Benji document here. There it is. This is our system. And the real main guts of it are three-part basic storage, which is working area, getting data in, manipulating it, having people access it, et cetera, et cetera. And then we dump copies into Chronopolis as a preservation network when they're considered fixed at whatever fixed happens to mean for the particular data set. And then the digital asset management system from the libraries is basically this discoverability, front end, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of what you see here. The other thing I do want to mention that would have been relevant in this morning's talk too is we work closely with our friends at CDL and the UC3, University of California Curation Center. And one of the main things we're using in this plan is we're using DOIs supplied through them via them for DataCite and using a tool that they provide called EasyID right there. And when I talk about the pilots, you see that's one of the important things that we're working with on campus. And one thing I want to note too is that in our process, the assignment of DOIs is actually a function that is owned by the libraries on campus. We're the ones who own the contract for that. So if someone on campus, basically the way it works is if they come through us, they get their citations for free. We pay the subscription, et cetera, et cetera. And so we're kind of the conduit for that to happen. So I want to talk about the pilots, and I want to talk about them not necessarily because of the content per se, but because we actually had a vetting process for these pilots, about a 6-month process. And we chose pilots because we wanted to test certain functionalities for the system, right? It wasn't that we had particular data sets we wanted, we had certain functionality we wanted to test. And the vetting process was something that happened by the oversight committee, the entire RCI oversight committee, so it had people from across campus, so that was pretty significant. So I just want to talk about these just briefly. The first one is a group on campus called the Brain Observatory, and they're one of the, at this point, kind of preeminent groups looking at this kind of research in the country. They, about 3 years ago, acquired the brain of a patient called H.M., who's often referred to as one of the most famous patients of the 20th century. Certainly in kind of neuropsychology is one of the bellwether cases. And so they have this, and they're creating digital surrogates and digital records, and et cetera, et cetera. And so we're going to be working with that collection. And this is an exciting one to work with because it gives us a chance to exercise a couple different functionalities, looking at preservation of images. One of the earlier speakers talked about kind of the when people do imaging, whether it's monkey teeth, or I forget what they said, something like that. It's very proprietary often, coming maybe based on the camera, maybe based on the stitching software they're using, all those kinds of things. And okay, so we get that in the preservation environment, the curation environment. What the heck can we do with this? So we're working with that. We're also working with the interaction of a campus curation service with their commercial site, but they pay a lot of money for people to go to. It's a big flashy site. If you look up the Brain Observatory, it's very slick, very nice. But how do we interact with that? How do we take their data objects and curate them and preserve them? What does that mean? And then lastly, again, kind of the image, they're creating, basically it's Google Earth for the brain. So it's these huge pyramidal things that are hundreds and hundreds of megabytes in size. How do we work with that? How do we do those things? How do you preserve that active kind of process? Second pilot is NSF's Open Topography Facility. Those who are familiar with NSF, this is basically a portal that is supplied for a community. So basically they take in data and data sets that are collected around the country, aggregate them, clean them up. They kind of do curation on their own to these things, then make them available to a wider community. And so we're working with them and looking at a very different set of requirements and needs. One is the preservation of raw data, because they get shipped hard drives and thumb drives and things like that of just junk. That's not junk. Of unorganized, unannotated materials. And so, how do you preserve that? How do you tie it to the end products? How do you tie it to, how do you tie the whole lifespan of the data? Okay. Again, how do we provide DOIs for complex data sets? And this was touched on a couple times this morning in that discussion. Their final product is, it could be 42 different pieces, from the raw data to derived products to publications to all these kinds of things. Where do you want your DOI pointing? How do you reference things, et cetera, et cetera. And then again, information passing between two different curated oral systems. We're working with an archaeology group on campus, and this is one of the premier archaeology groups studying a certain part of the world. And that they go out into the field, they're constantly out in the field, and they bring stuff back and do all kinds of things with it. They're leaders in what's called cyber archaeology, which is how do you tie together this whole practice of not just digging up pots and bits and pieces of this and that, but making digital records and surrogates, and how do you tie that to monographs that are coming out and to websites and all those kinds of things. They're very interested in how they go out to Syria and Jordan, and they don't have electricity where they work, they don't have internet connection, so they have a whole different process that comes in. And how do they bring that into kind of the digital realm that happens? And they're also this is a field that's in a lot of great change right now in terms of coming into the digital realm and digital world, so working closely with them. Maybe aware one of the big groups on our campus is SIO, Scripps Institution of Oceanography, one of the preeminent oceanography sites in the world. We're working with one of their core collections, which it's active now, they're adding to it constantly, but it goes back to 1916, various representations of it. And this was important to us because we're actually looking at how they create a local collection with local importance and local ways of searching it. It kind of uses pedagogical tools in their teaching environments and all those kinds of things. But then it gets uploaded into a national database, actually Boulder, Colorado, that has a whole different set of standards and different set of usages. And so how are we going to work with this national body and still meet our local needs? And the last one I'll mention here is the Lab for Computational Astrophysics. These guys do really cool work. These are some of the 3 people using all of the cycles on the supercomputer. They can literally generate petabytes of data per hour. And so that's a big deal. And how to work with that. They're simulating the Big Bang and all of the creation of life after that. And so they're very interested not just in scale, obviously, but how do they work with improved collaborations, because they have data that they generate that a lot of other people are interested in, because it's got so many facets to it. It's sky surveys and computational analysis and all these kinds of things. So we're looking at how to work with data sets like that. So I think you can see that if I could have listed all these different kind of bullet points after all of the pilots listing here. And that's kind of the subset of functions that we've been tasked by campus to figure out. And then hopefully take those and kind of turn them sideways and separate them from the specific pilots and say, okay, now this is what we can do for campus, this is the kind of work we can do, and bring more people into the fold. The last thing I'll mention, just because it's 2012 and everyone has to mention it, we're doing data management plans. We're part of the data management plan toolkit that's already been mentioned a couple times, coming out of CDL. We have a customized portal version of it, which is one of the options you can have when you work with that. And a lot of our local researchers, we've been teaching classes on this for about 6 months, and there have been hundreds of people attend. So it's been really good. And so, like I said, happy to take questions, send me an email.
Yeah, I think we're going to take 1 or 2 quick questions if anybody has some things they're itching to ask. Otherwise, there will be time at the end for general discussion.
Yes, I have a question about scalability. You mentioned this a little bit, that you're using existing tools when possible. These pilot projects are going to show campus what you can do and bring others into the fold. I'm wondering, with these existing projects and bringing more people into the fold, does that mean you're working with like departmental IT and training them, or how much is what your group is doing in the libraries versus what people, already existing in those?
That's an excellent question. That's actually one of the more difficult parts of this, is the integration into the rest of campus in some sense, because we're a very decentralized university. We don't have a CIO, we don't have a central kind of campus IT in that sense. And so we've got 50 different homegrown campus IT departments. And so that's one of the driving reasons from the very beginning that it was really good that this was coming from this group of leaders on campus promoting this program. Because what we're hoping is that if we do a good job, we kind of bubble that back up, and then they are the ones who are in charge of kind of taking that back to the rest of campus. Because that's been more successful when it's kind of coming from that side of things rather than the libraries going out and trying to say, well, we can do this better than you're doing it, kind of work. I do want to say, too, in terms of scale, I think that's one of the things that we're really been tasked with and are pushing on is we might be able to do this really well for a half dozen or 10 pilots. How might it scale? We're a decent-sized research university. How might it scale for 500 projects like that, or even 100 projects? And I think that's going to be the point where we really need to kind of buckle down and see. We don't know yet how that's going to go.
One more question. Thank you.
For your survey, did you define long-term preservation? On my campus, I'm talking to faculty, especially with data management plan. Long-term meant 7 years.
Yeah, I think we said something like that. It was 5 to 7 years. I think it was, I honestly don't remember the exact language. I think it also may have said based on funder requirements, which is a nice generic way of saying it. Yeah, we did not certainly use language at that point, I don't believe, in terms of perpetuity, those kinds of things.
Thank you, David.